Yeah, that's a very great point, and it is because especially as we're a child, we're just absorbing everything. We're like a sponge. And there's a lot of like conditioning that we learn from our parents and from people that are around us.
Yeah.
So if parents tell us like, this is good, or this is the way that we should do life, or this is how we should spend our money, right? Then you'll pick up those same habits. Like, well, that's what my parents taught me. So if I do the opposite of that, for example, they might be like, no, don't do that. So then in your head, you're like, okay, don't get rid of that behavior. I need to continue to do this behavior. And then no one teaches them like, well, that's actually what's putting you in a bad position, or that's what's been drowning your parents this whole time. So absolutely.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Black Wealth Connect. It is around mental health, and I feel like this episode is going to be very beneficial to people that might be struggling from these issues and the financial side of things when it comes to mental health too. So there's many ways to tackle this, and obviously speaking to my guest, you're definitely going to be able to hear different perspectives and things like that. So Nick, how are you, brother?
Hey, my man. I love what you're doing here. I think the movement, what we're doing for the community and what we're trying to educate, man, it's so powerful.
I had no idea. Like, obviously I know that right now you are in the mental health field. So just provide your title just for the people that... just for the people to know.
Yeah. So my professional experience has just been a psychiatric nurse, which is basically in mental health nursing. That's what my qualification. But what we do pretty much in the community is provide like psychology support. So we've got like a psychology clinic, which is called Recharge, and we just provide support, therapy, connect people with professionals to get support with their mental health. So
awesome. Obviously the founder of that company, you and shout out to Femi. You guys started that. So that's awesome. Just walk us through again, like just really quickly. So what inspired you guys to actually to open the Recharge Wellness business?
Well, I think for us, when we work in a hospital setting, so a lot of times when people come to us at the hospital, it's because they're in crisis. So they've come to us like, I've been dealing with stress in this situation for like 3-4 months, but I thought it was normal. And then it started to exacerbate. And now I decided I need to present to hospital. Now I can't, I feel like this is the only way I can get support. 100%. So we realized, well, there's a gap, right? Because there's something that we can do in the community to prevent people to get into that point. But there's no support for people in the community, or people don't know where to get access. So that's why we created Recharge. We want to be like the bridge.
That's awesome. So when it comes to finance, break it down for me, Nick. Like what exactly have you done in that space, just for people to understand? Because obviously this episode is, as I mentioned at the start, it is in connection to mental health, but it's also attached to finance, because people do struggle from addiction when it comes to finance, especially with the unsecured space, which we're going to dive into, like your credit cards, your personal loans and all that. But what's your experience in finance?
So, when I was studying my nursing degree, I was working at the bank. So I was doing home lending at CBA. So did that for a couple of years, which was great. Loved it. I don't know. I always had an interest in finance and also mental health. So I thought whilst I'm studying, might as well, work at the bank and try to get a little bit of experience and figure out what I like before I actually graduate. But then ended up doing mental health nursing.
Mental health nursing.
So that's predominantly my experience lending. Even after when I graduated, I did a little bit of mortgage broking as well. So I got a lot more experience when it comes to like lending. When we speak to customers about their finances, their goals, what it is that they're trying to achieve, or even why they want money in the first place. And you hear a lot of different purposes and stuff. So that's kind of more where my experience is. So
when you say lending, was it, so were you a credit assessor? Like, were you actually approving finance for people, or was it, or when you, because lending is quite broad. So what specifically were you doing in lending? Just
home lending. So I'd be like more so, like I wasn't the credit officer, so we'd still have to submit applications, go to credit. But I'll be the one that will like look at the deal, be like, okay, does this make sense? Kind of like I'm just like the lender. So when you want to have a conversation, be like, I want to apply for a loan, who do I speak to? It's
okay, gotcha. So you enjoyed it. So you enjoyed that role? Like,
I did, man. I did.
Because that's it's good experience. Obviously, being in that space and understanding how mortgages works. The documentations that you need and things like that. It's really good, because obviously now when you in a position to then go ahead and buy your own property in the future, or investment properties, or that, did you feel like that experience really helped you?
It's one of those things that are going to stay with me forever. I feel. And I've just always had an interest in the property market, so I'm like, it's good to kind of like get my feet in and understand how it all kind of works. You're having conversations. Like when I was doing this, I was like 21, so like I knew that there was like imposter syndrome. I'm like, fuck, like I was speaking to these guys that are like 30, 40, but and I'm here 21, and I'm like on top of that I'm African as well, so it's like you're on the back foot a little bit. it. So legit, I'm telling you, it's real. It's real.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, man, I love them, man. Like just having those conversations, you know, doing all the finances, verifying the income, you know, and then giving them the good news, like you've been approved, or
and changing people's lives.
It's one of the people's largest purchases, and if you know, if I could play a role in that, I feel like, you know, it's like a massive impact, like massive. So
do you feel like there should be more of that? Like, I mean, with the applications, especially for me being within the credit space, like one thing I want to tackle a lot is when it comes to finances, especially within the African community. It's something that I don't see too often when it comes to documents come to my table and I see ID. I don't really see too many, you know, African people purchasing homes and doing all these things, right? So, I mean, from that, did it also spark something in you to be like, oh, you know what, like me being African and I'm doing lending, is that maybe I should deliver a bigger message out there for people to know how easy it is to buy a home. It's not that complicated, you know. People think it's that difficult, but I mean, you work in the bank. Did you feel that it wasn't as difficult as what people may think it is?
Yeah, it's just like people don't know, right? Like it seems like like this big asset. Like how am I ever going to do that? It feels impossible. I know that you're obviously, you know, even like my parents, they've all bought properties, migrated to Australia. Properties were cheap, you know,
cheap,
100,000, 200,000, and then people are feeling like, how am I going to get in the market? Properties are like $1 million now, but like you said, it's really not that hard. And I think that if there's more education, especially more black people, because a lot of black people are doing great things in finance,
amazing,
but no one's educating. You know, like you see. Even when I was lending, you see that like particular subgroups or community groups will stay with each other. Like one particular one I saw was like, obviously like even like the Lebanese community or the Jewish community, there's like people that are in the space, like finance, for example, and whenever they were trying to get any finance or anything that goes to this particular person, so they all get educated amongst that community group, and then that then gets sent off to somebody else.
Exactly.
But I didn't really see, I mean, and I'm not saying that no one was doing it. Maybe I just didn't see it. But I feel like there's a lot more opportunity, man, because I know we're doing so much great things. There's so many lenders, black lenders that I saw when I was working, but like no one's really like, I don't know, doing anything for the community.
For the community,
tell them how easy it is, or like, you know, if they got properties, if they got families that have parents and like leveraging their equity and going guarantor, like, you know, like, all that kind of stuff is an option, but no one talks about it.
No one talks about it, and I think that's like that's the hidden thing, right? Like, and obviously that's why Black Wealth Connect, we want to, you know, just hearing what Nick said and the gems he's dropping about like, people should kind of do their research and find out, like, you know, go speak to a broker, go find out how easy it is to actually buy a home. It's not that complicated. You could have 2% savings, 5%. It doesn't matter. Like, just start from somewhere, right?
Exactly.
That's the most important thing. So now I want to like switch gears a bit and talk about when it comes to, you know, your current role at the moment and how we can tie finance into it, right? So obviously there's a lot of people that, not a lot, let's hope not a lot of people, but there are people that struggle from addiction when it comes to, you know, taking out unsecured loans. And when we're talking about unsecured loans, I don't know if I mentioned this in the podcast again, and I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself, but that's like your credit cards, your personal loans, your payday lenders, like the quick ones, like the cash converters, all that stuff that's not good for your credit file and things like that. So they take out these loans to then go towards their addiction, right? Like we see that quite often. So you being in that space when it comes to mental health, I mean, can you give us examples of maybe things that you do see in that space and how, you know, and how people can kind of, or what guidance you give people? Yeah,
absolutely. Well, we know that like finances obviously like applies for everybody. And finance is like, especially when it comes to mental health, it's like a top 3 stressor for a lot of people. So when we see why people are stressed, you know, a common one could be like relationships, could be work. And then like what we see commonly is finances, being like, can't get on top of my bills, can't support my kids, can't achieve the goals that I want. And that's a massive contributor to a lot of people's decline in their mental health. And I remember when I was lending, before I even got into the space of mental health, like I'd see people that would come to me being like, oh, you know, I just want to do like a top up. And for those that are listening, like a top up is like if you've got a home loan, you've got equity that you want to access and you just want to borrow some additional cash against it. That's what we call a top up commonly in the finance space. And they'd be like, okay, I'll just borrow $10, $20 or $30,000 just to, they'll say like renovations, right, for example. They'll say something that you want to hear so we can get it approved.
I'm so happy Nick said this, please. Thank you. Renovation is, so look, Nick, You know what? This is gonna be one of the best moments. I'm glad that you picked up on it.
Yeah.
Because renovations is like the main thing people would say I want cash out for, or I want to top up for. But you know damn well. Sometimes I Google the homes, and they're already brand new. They're just built. The house just got built two weeks ago. What are you renovating?
I know they're talking.
Anyway, we know it.
I know it.
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, man. Well, I was like, I know my calls are recorded. I mean, if you're saying what I want to hear, that's all right. Cool. I'm a ticket. No dramas.
Sorry. So we had a moment there. Yeah. But anyway, So you were saying,
but then like you'd be like, yeah, cool. So like you start assessing the application, and as part of our assessment, you obviously scrutinize the transaction. And you see it's like sports bet, gambling, crown, casino, all these kind of things, and then like. Obviously, like this large lump sum of money, and like I wasn't really in the mental health space then. I was just more so looking at it from like a finance perspective. I'm like, oh, like we can't lend for this, right? Like, but I never really understood why we couldn't.
Yeah, got you.
I was like, nah, we can't do it.
Yeah.
But I was seeing it quite a few times where people would come to us as a lender wanting to borrow money for those particular type of reasons, and even when you look at unsecured credit, like a credit card, for example, like people easily go over that limit, maybe because they just got like an addiction with spending, buying clothes or whatever it is, that they just continuously see themselves going over their limit with no means to pay it back. And in the mental health space, you know, what we often see is that when people come to us and they say our finances are stressor, and we're trying to figure out like, okay, well, what's the financial position? They're telling us that like, oh, I've got all this debt that I don't know I'm going to go pay back, or I've got this credit card and it's very difficult for me to get on top of it because the interest keeps capitalizing and it's very difficult, and I'm not earning that much, and with my decline and the stress in the mental health, it's very difficult to come on top of it. So those were common things that we were seeing, or that I see in the mental health space, and obviously it's quite problematic. It's like, okay, well, why are finance is obviously like quite a common stressor.
Gotcha. Yeah.
What are people doing with their finances that is allowing them to feel like they're going to put themselves in these vulnerable positions that's going to decline their mental health? And most times it's I guess there's obviously a lot of different reasons, but one thing that we see is that it's an addiction that they're feeding.
So they could have like a personal addiction to something. Like, so let's say, for example, like a drug or whatever. Yeah. And they need to stay on top of that. So they'll go ahead and smash their credit file anywhere to get any type of loan.
Absolutely. Like, I'm just so hungry for it. Like, you know, when you talk about people that like, you know, like you said, drugs, for example, so I'm just going to do anything to get it. Like, I'm so addicted to it. So when they get $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 to be able to get this, like, I'm going to do it. Right. And it's like, or even like alcohol, or even for some people,
alcohol must be a big
it's just spending, you know, for like their self-esteem or whatever it may be. So it's like, okay, well, when we have clients that present to us for that, the thing that we can't do, unfortunately, is that we can't be able to control their financial position, how they spend their money. Unfortunately, we can't. But what we can do, and what we try to focus on, is okay, well, let's focus on this addiction. Like, what is it that makes you feel like you need to do this? And especially when it comes to drugs and alcohol, like that's a whole completely
different ball game.
That's a whole different ball game. There might be drug and alcohol counselor, maybe rehab. You know, might need to go through a program, depending on the extent of the addiction. Might need to go through those processes. But even if we keep it simple for this podcast, like with people that feel they need to put themselves in excessive debt just to buy like materialistic items that they don't need, it's like, well, why? And that's kind of like the common question that we start to ask. Like, you know, if you know that you don't have a means to be able to pay this back, or you know it's going to put you in a bit of hardship, then it's like, well, why are we making that decision?
Yeah.
And a lot of times there's like maybe there's like imposter syndrome that people might be facing, or there may be
imposter syndrome being
like, I might have put on this particular facade that I'm this, you know, successful person, so I've got to kind of live up to that facade. So let's say, like, I know even I've seen people that are like, you know, Instagram verified, living this amazing lifestyle, you know, social media being a massive thing, right? So he's like, okay, I got to live up with that lifestyle. So to live up with that lifestyle, I got to make sure that I'm keeping up with the trends. I'm showing my like materialistic items, and like most times, like, well, how am I gonna fund it? And sometimes we see that all the times, even with rappers, right? Like even like you think about American artists that going to death, like how make millions of dollars, but it's like I'm keeping up with this facade. So
damn, that is wow, because when you think about it in a very deep level, like on a deep level, like you don't realize that how many things can lead to addiction when it comes to, you know, you trying to keep up to a certain lifestyle. I think that's massive, especially in this generation now with social media. Like, you know, especially things like Afterpay, you know, pay later, all these things, right? Like it's easy for these people to become very addicted to these things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very easy. Walk into a shop, okay, this jacket. Oh, okay. you know, I need it now because I'm literally going to a party in 2 hours. But they don't even have money in their account.
I have money in the account, exactly.
They just do it.
Yeah.
So these avenues for addiction, they're more common now compared to years ago.
Absolutely. And like, you know, we can't even blame people, right? Like it's marketing. Like people know how to market it. People know how to make it easy. They know how to go through people's psyche to be able to make them make the decisions that they want them to make. So it's not something that I promote. But at the same time, it's something for everybody that's listening to be aware of. It's like, well, if you find yourself going through a particular habit or routine and it's putting you in positions of hardship, then the question you want to be asking yourself is like, okay, well, why am I doing this?
Exactly.
And I think why is probably the biggest question. Even when we see clients at Recharge, it's like, we're not here trying to tell them how to do their life, but we're just trying to understand, okay, well, what's making you drive this behavior? Because there's a reason for everything. You don't just do something for no reason.
For no reason,
There's a reason why. Most times it's just our subconscious acting it, and we're not really picking it back to our conscious state so we can actually realize and internalize what's actually going on.
But that could be due to, like, let's say things like low self-esteem, like depression. Like depression can lead to, I'm assuming, like, obviously you're the specialist, but like, you know, based on what you hear about depression, because they don't feel good about themselves, or, you know, that could lead to them going out and, you know, like you said, try and buy things to kind of feel like they're you know, they're better, or
absolutely,
you know,
absolutely. It's common. It's so common. Like people will do anything, especially if like they've got a poor mental health or they feel like they can't interact with people and they feel like the only way they can interact or be accepted. So I think that if we really bring it back to like the basic lens, like most people at the end of the day, they just want to be loved. They just want to be able to feel like I'm cared about, that I'm accepted. And anytime they feel like that's been threatened, then that's when they start to do things to be able to get that back to that unconditional love again. So yeah, so they'll do things to be able to do that. And obviously sometimes it's coming from a poor place, which is truly sad. And we just want to be able to support them through that.
Wow, that is unbelievable. Like, you know, you really broke that down so well, because there's so many ways to look at it. And like we say, society makes things very difficult, you know, because everybody's trying to keep up. You know, everybody's trying to keep up, no matter how they have to keep up, obviously, you know, and, you know, there's a lot of pressure within communities too, you know, like we talk about rappers, right? Like, you know, that lifestyle and, you know, how they glorify driving expensive cars, having chains and all that. Like, you're not necessarily always going to have the money for that. Absolutely, you know what I mean? Absolutely. So you have to figure out a way, by all means necessary, to try and keep up to that lifestyle.
Exactly. If that's what's been idolized, if that's what's been deemed as cool, and that's what's acceptable, and that's what's kind of like, you know, maybe like Andrew Tate, you know, when he was preaching about like, you know, you got to be this type of guy, you got to be like this alpha male. And to be this alpha male, you need to be able to provide, have all these things. And then a guy that maybe is not that person is going to feel like, okay, well, I need to do all of those things to fit that particular facade. But it's because they don't know better, because these are their idols. These are people that are like got these big audiences that are showcasing themselves as role models, teaching people how they need to live life. And it's difficult. It takes a really strong person that's really knows themselves and is confident in themselves to be like, you know what, like I don't really care about any of those things. I'm just going to do what I want. And it's hard, and there will be times where you get challenged. Even myself, I'm like,
of course, we're all human beings.
I'm human, and my family like, oh, you know, like maybe you should get some new shoes. And it's not saying that you can't care for yourself or want to look good. It's all about a balance, right? Like there's a happy medium at the end of the day. But I feel like if it's like back on topic, if it's putting you in hardship where you can't manage your finances, then you know, that's something that's worth addressing.
So when it comes to all these things, like keeping up to society and trying to, like, you know, maintain that lifestyle for people that, you know, need to take out unsecured debts to, you know, to keep this facade or whatever it is that they're trying to achieve, right? So what age brackets do you usually see that happen? Because just from my perspective, before you enter that, sorry, I'm assuming that with the younger generation that it affects them more, right? Or does it affect all ages? Like, I mean, let me know what's happening in society.
Well, I mean, when it comes to unsecured debt, like, I mean, you can only apply for them
when you're 18.
I guess it's common that we see it them, especially when they're not, that might not be that.
That's the youth I'm talking about, the 18-year-olds and
when they're not financially literate.
They're not financial, they don't understand finance.
So just like, oh yeah, let me get a credit card, like that's no drama. They might not understand how it works. And I think the banks have a responsibility as well to be able to educate them more. Like let them know what they're actually getting into, but that's a whole.
That's a whole nother ballgame, because they're talking about responsible lending, but that's like, it's quite, Anyways, we can,
but I think it's quite common there that we'll see that. But even to be honest, man, like I would even challenge like some of the young adults. I mean, not young adults, but people like even like above 30s. I feel like sometimes, even as I'm getting older, like I'm only 27 now, but like I'm still seeing people within my age group, even above, that are still kind of trapped in that little bit of a facade, feeling like they need to be this person that they're not. So it's one of those things that I feel is commonly in like adolescents because they're still trying to figure themselves out. So it's quite common for us to see that. But even in adults, man, like, you know, it happens wide throughout the lifespan.
So, I mean, what ways can you kind of, I know that obviously you can't give financial advice when it comes to mental health. You know, if people are struggling from these addictions, taking out loans, whatever it is that they're doing, right? They're obviously sinking themselves into debt. Yeah. So within the mental health space, like what is it that you can do to kind of get them out of that pattern, if anything?
Yeah. I think it's just that. It's about us trying to focus on the pattern or the habit and really trying to solve that. I think that obviously it's going to be helpful for us to get them out of their debt and that financial position. So there's no point in, you know, fixing and eradicating that financial debt if they're just going to go back and repeat that exact same habit. So what it is that we want to focus on is like, okay, well, let's focus on the core of why you're actually doing this behavior.
Correct.
And try to address that behavior.
Yeah.
What is it about it that maybe kind of fills you, that like drives you, that makes you feel good about doing this particular thing? And let's work towards that. Let's put some measures in place. Let's maybe marginally adjust some of the spending or the behaviors that you're doing so we don't end up putting ourselves in this position again. And you can do that through therapy. Or even for some people, they can do that themselves as long as they just have that honest conversation with themselves and they're like, okay, well, why am I doing this? Why is it important for me to be able to do this? Why do I need to fit this facade? Does it actually make me feel good at the end of the day? And really asking yourself those series of questions. And then maybe if yourself, you might be able to just put those limitations on yourself, maybe reduce your credit card limit, pay it off, and make those steps. Yeah. Those are all things that you can look at doing. But I think that that's what I would focus on. You know, obviously we got to clear the debt, but let's focus on the root.
On the root problem of why you're putting yourself in this financial hardship. Absolutely. Yeah.
It's just like changing behaviors. Like, you know, like it's like any habit can be changed because we've learned this behavior for a particular reason.
It's all the time, yeah.
So just the same way that we learned it, the positive thing is that we can unlearn that particular behavior as well. Just like when people are like, oh, I'm trying to get into fitness, trying to get into shape. They spent this whole time doing this particular routine that was obviously incongruent to them being able to try to get in fitness or get in shape. So then they have to teach themselves how to get into that lifestyle, into that routine so they can be able to live that healthy lifestyle that they want. Exact same thing when it comes to your mental health and an addiction and that behavior. You kind of focus on it that way. And that's quite a simplistic way to look at it.
But it definitely makes sense.
But like, you know, you go through a process.
Because I feel like that is something that is attached to any mental health issue, right? Like you guys would focus on the core of many issues, right?
We try to.
I mean, that's what generally you guys try and do. And then from there, that kind of opens up people to start getting better from the core.
Yeah, like, you know, addiction is one thing. Obviously, you know, we might see people with like depression or anxiety or might have experienced some complex trauma. And I guess depending on the presenting issue, there's going to be different ways in which you will approach it. But I guess ultimately, yes, that's the same goal. We want to be able to help people reach their own conclusions, be able to kind of look after themselves mentally, have the skills and tools to be able to manage so that they don't need to rely and depend on the healthcare system or depend on us as professionals.
Do you feel like also like people that are also struggling from being able to manage their finances or anything, do you think that can also come from their parents? Is that something that can start from an earlier stage of life? Obviously, if their parents did know how to handle money, and then from there, you know, what can you really teach your kids, you know, eventually, you know, so it's just everybody's drowning, you know, from every generation. Is that something that is also common?
Yeah, that's a very great point, and it is, because, you know, especially as we're a child, we're just absorbing everything, we're like a sponge. And there's a lot of like conditioning that we learn from our parents and from people that are around us. So if parents tell us like, this is good, or this is the way that we should do life, or this is how we should spend our money, right? Then you'll pick up those same habits, like, well, that's what my parents taught me. So if I do the opposite of that, for example, they might be like, no, don't do that. So then in your head, you're like, okay, like, get rid of that behavior. I need to continue to do this behavior. And then no one teaches them like, oh, you know, well, that's actually what's putting you in a bad position, or that's what's been drowning your parents this whole time. So absolutely.
Look, I want to dive into race, because the reason why I want to say race is because obviously a lot of us, you know, especially our parents, you know, they weren't born here, you know, they came here as refugees or however they came here, right? So they weren't taught any financial literacy, right? So when it comes to like people that are suffering from, you know, financial issues, you know, like we say, going in debt, not understanding how to manage unsecured loans, or whatever the case may be, do you generally see like it's a specific like race of people that do that? Like, or is it, I mean, you get what I'm saying without me having to actually say it, you know what I mean? Like, is that common, or is that?
Look, to be honest, I haven't done enough to be able to determine. I haven't done enough of data, but I'm like sure there is. But I'm sure there is, right?
Because I just feel like we're... Yeah, sorry. Yeah, you continue.
Say?
No, I just feel like they set like kind of us up to fail in a way. Like, you know, especially like people coming from these third world countries and not understand. There's no banks there's no system there. Come to Australia, here's a $20,000 credit card. Like, what are you going to do? You're going to spend it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember, like, I mean, this is not to point out one particular ethnicity, but I remember I was having a conversation with one of my friends whose background is Polynesian, and he was just telling me, like, from his culture and from his perspective, because I don't really know much about the Polynesian culture, but he was saying, you know, when I was growing up, like, no one in my family, A, went to university, or B, ever owned a property. And we were always conditioned and set that standard, like, it's kind of impossible for us to be able to do that. Exactly. So it's like, you know, coming in with that notion with your parents already telling you that, you know, this goal that you want to achieve that everybody's achieving is like far from us being able to do that. Then you kind of carry that. It's like, yeah, what's the point of doing it? Like my parents already told me that this makes no sense. So I guess I would say in some particular groups that maybe grew up with that same particular mindset or even born in a particular socioeconomic status, like they might have that same kind of perspective. Then like, I'm sure that you will see it in particular groups if you were really to analyze the data. Absolutely.
Wow, that is so interesting. Yeah. No, very, very interesting because, it's just, I have so many thoughts in my head because when it comes to all this stuff, it is very important that people do understand the importance of understanding how finance works. Like, you know, obviously with this platform because, you know, I'm talking, the reason why, like I always say, like I started this platform is because I went through my own issues when it comes to finance, you know, like exactly the same way. Like, so obviously, you know, bad debts, but like, you know, credit files, things like that, not understanding how phones work. You take out a phone, you don't realize that, you know, and I was trying to be cool, you know, with the hip tops. I don't know if you remember the hip tops, they flip up.
You're telling me you're a different generation, bro. I don't know what you're talking about, bro.
No, but with the hip tops, you're like, you kind of flip them up. They're like two-way phones.
Oh, those phones, the keypads.
The keypads, exactly. So those phones, like that was hot property. And obviously back then I was rapping and, you know, I wanted to look cool. I did
Soulja Boy doing it in his video clip. Yeah, like, kiss me to the phone, flip it up. I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I've seen that.
So for me, like you try and keep up to all these things and like over time you don't realize that same phone is the same reason why 5 years later you can't buy a house.
You know how crazy that is?
Like it's like your credit file gets damaged. Like I want people to listen to this message. Like when we talk about like mental health and like especially, you know, drowning yourself in debt, not understanding how all these things work. Like what happens now when you, like for example, a young mother that, you know, let's say a single mother that has a child now, obviously she has a child, single mother. And then what happens is she then goes to buy a property, right? And then because of something she's done 5 years ago or 4 years ago, for example, because usually it drops off after 5 years, but not all the time, right? But buys a phone 4 years ago, forgets to pay it, she struggles, loses her job or whatever. But now because she's a single mum, she can't even buy a house because of that same phone 4 years ago because your credit file gets damaged.
It's crazy.
So, and these are the things that can also lead to mental health issues because at one stage, like, you know, I'm at an age where I wanted to buy a car, I wanted to do this, I wanted to do that. Like I had so many, you know, I had a big vision and things like that were stopping me. So until I learned, okay, you know what, let me fix my credit file, let me get everything back on track, pay off everything, remove everything. And then that way I saw my life change within a heartbeat, you know?
Absolutely.
So this is what I'm saying. Like I feel like people without having that education, sometimes it can be very difficult for them to kind of understand. So like what are some other examples like of things that you see when it comes to, you know, mental health around finance? Is there
I think what you said was really interesting because it just brought me back to a memory about when
talk to me.
When I had clients that when I was doing their lending and they'll be like, I can't get this home loan because of, like you said, a decision that they made like 10 years ago. No one really knows the impact of those that like this will carry on. And then we see people that are traumatized, they might feel anxious, they don't want to get any lending anymore. And that puts people back, right? Because like obviously like lending, home lending are like, it helps people get into the market. It helps people accelerate things. It's not the only way, but it's a key way that a lot of people utilize as a tool to be able to get into the market. People got anxiety around finances or getting out loans because of their experiences. Well, that's quite problematic sometimes. Because now they're saying to themselves, they've got to live a different lifestyle. Not what I'm saying that it's bad all the time, but you know, it's something that can limit people and set people back because of that particular decision. There's platforms like this, like what you're doing at the moment, that are really, really powerful, that are going to help people be able to make more informed financial decisions. Yeah.
No, that's crazy. And also even like, when it comes to people understanding, like obviously with the financial literacy like financial literacy aspect. So even just them, doing their own research and understanding how things work is very important, especially at a young age. Like, don't be tempted to go out and buy things that you might not need to buy. And because it's very easy to get caught up. You see your friends all having the latest iPhones. You go on plan. Like, the temptation is there. Like,
peer pressure exists.
Peer pressure exists a lot.
A lot. Yeah, I mean, I see people that commonly like have this obsession to want to get the latest phone, or they just need to get like the latest of everything, or they might get influenced by a mate to make a decision that they didn't want to do. So, because like peer pressure is massive, right? And even like with finances, it's not something that people talk about a lot, like forcing somebody to take out this debt, or they might even have a friend that be like, hey man, can you lend me some money? Or, just go to a bank and give me some money because that's going to help me do X, Y, Z. Like, those are all common things that exist. Like, it's very, very matter of fact.
Also, this is actually what I wanted to touch on really quickly too. It's like, it's also hard for people that have defaults, right? Like on their credit file. And then what happens is now, if any other bank is going to give them an opportunity, or any bank give them any type of lending, whether it's unsecured or whatever, they're going to charge you the highest interest rate. So automatically it sets them up to keep failing. You know what I mean? So rather than them, like they could have taken out a phone years ago, made a very poor decision, and because of that, now they have to pay 3 times more on their repayments. Like, what is that going to do for them?
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? So in a way, the system is designed to it keeps people that have made poor decisions in a very bad position.
It does. So, it's sad. And like, obviously, like when you look at it from their perspective, like I could get why they would put those measures in place, like from a risk perspective.
From a risk perspective,
But you're right. Like, it doesn't really doesn't offer people a second chance. Like, people made mistakes. Maybe the times back then, people weren't as financially informed about these particular things, and now they have to suffer the consequence now. Like, it's unfortunate, but at the same time, I can also understand from their perspective why they're doing those particular things. So I think that like the main thing right now is like I said to you before, like with this platform and people being able to get informed, like that's really the main things they can be doing. And I guess for anybody that finds themselves in that particular habit, doing those particular behaviors, getting themselves in debt, taking out unsecured lending, or feeling peer pressure to do anything, man, like it's just all about, just seeking that support. And that support can just be like speaking to a psychologist. It could even be speaking to a friend. It could even be doing some journaling, and really being able to understand your thoughts and why you're doing these particular behaviors. I think that's the most important thing that we can be doing. The self-awareness is key. Most time people don't even know that they're doing these things.
Yeah, no, awesome. So, what I wanted to ask you, Nick, is so if anybody feels like they are going through some of these issues, where they feel like they're not being able to manage their finance, and they just feel like, they're depressed, or, they just don't feel right, like, because obviously, debt takes your mindset to a different place, not for the good. But so what I wanted to ask you, Nick, so if somebody feels like they are going through this at the moment where, they're not able to manage their finance, their mindset is in a very bad place, they feel depressed, obviously because they're drowning in debt, they don't know how to get out of it. I mean, so what can they do to obviously reach out to you? Like, I mean, what's your contact, and how can they get in touch?
Yeah, well, I think for some people, like, if you need to speak to a psychologist, you can certainly use our service. It's at just rechargewellness.com.au, and then you would have a conversation with one of our mental health nurses. We'll see, even if this is the right service, it's just more so being able to point you in the right direction. So if you speak to a psychologist, you can. I guess it depends on what you're also struggling with as well. Like, if you're feeling quite, depressed, very low in mood, feeling helpless, you're not too sure that you can guarantee yourself safety. There's obviously services like Lifeline, and but I think, look, man, for some people that don't really know and just want a place to start, like just Recharge Wellness, speak to one of our mental health clinicians, and we'll point you in the right direction.
Nah, definitely. And we'll put all the information down in the description for anybody that's obviously going through that stuff too, and just obviously not feeling right in general, right? It doesn't mean just it's about finance, but obviously this show. This episode was catered more to like finance, and if you're going through, any kind of bad debt that's putting you in a bad mind space.
Absolutely. I think that if there's one takeaway that I could have from this whole podcast, if there's anything that you guys got from this, I think it's more so just an opportunity for you to just kind of like reflect on yourself and just be like, where am I at when it comes to like my spending or my behaviors? Do I feel like I could be experiencing a symptom of some of the things that we spoke about. And if you are, let's take some steps to be able to make sure that it doesn't manifest into something bigger than what it can potentially be, than what it is at the moment.
It can become quite serious. Yeah,
exactly. So I think the key, man, if we can just make people take some action, then I think that we've done a good job.
Beautiful, man. Man, I want to say thank you so much for coming on. I had to harass you,
hey, man. Big fee. Big fee, man. It's a big fee, man. I see the check.
I appreciate you. I appreciate you, man. It's awesome. And yeah, I can't wait for this episode to drop. Black Wealth Connect. Big shout out to Nick. Recharge Wellness.
That's it.
Make sure you reach out to them if there's anything that you, as we mentioned, feeling down, feeling in any way, shape, or form that you're just not in the right mindset. So reach out to them, and thank you very much for another episode.
Hey, pleasure,
appreciate
man.
it. Thanks for coming. Bye.